Before we talk about systems, policies, or practices, I want to start here with children. Every decision made in schools, every policy, every response, every consequence lands on a child. And too often, those decisions are made without ever pausing to ask, what is this child actually experiencing? I've spent over 20 years inside school buildings. I've taught and led in public schools and charter schools, affluent communities and high needs communities, rural districts, inner city schools, and everything in between. I worked in schools serving primarily traditionally marginalized students, schools serving mostly white students, and schools that were deeply culturally diverse. One school, there were more than 80 countries, languages, and lived experiences. And across all of those spaces, one truth has remained consistent. When adults feel overwhelmed, pressured, or unsupported, systems tend to prioritize order over understanding. And children feel the weight of that choice. Children are not the problem. Systems that fail to see children fully are. This podcast exists because I've seen what happens when we slow down, ask better questions, and choose responsibility over convenience. I'm Dr. Kristi Love, and this is The Advocate, amplifying voices, challenging systems, prioritizing children.
Dr. Kristi N. Love is an experienced educator and advocate dedicated to empowering students and families to ensure children receive a high-quality education. She specializes in culturally responsive teaching, restorative practices, and social-emotional learning, helping schools create supportive and inclusive environments. Through the Advocate podcast, she amplifies voices, challenges inequitable systems, and keeps children at the center of every conversation.
So let me tell you why the Advocate exists. Because this work isn't theoretical for me, it's personal. Every time I scroll through social media and see posts about schools, behavior, or discipline, I feel pulled to respond. I see videos of teachers and students escalating back and forth. I see parents frustrated with teachers, administrators, and school policies. I see teachers at their wits' end over student behavior and parent responsibilities. And far too often, I see children being blamed instead of supported. I see adults escalating situations that actually require regulation, care, and understanding. And something about that has never sat right with me. I didn't enter education knowing everything. Truthfully, I still don't know everything. I didn't always get it right. But what I did have was a heart to love children and a willingness to grow. And over time, that willingness changed everything. There was actually a point in my career when I seriously considered leaving the profession. And it wasn't because I didn't care, it was because I cared deeply and felt like I was failing anyway. I was frustrated with student behavior. I felt disrespected. I felt unsupported by administration. And slowly, I began to lose hope. Not because I wasn't a strong teacher. I was. I planned engaging and relevant lessons. I built relationships. I was that teacher who played in student faculty basketball games breaking ankles. I knew all the current dance steps. I took students into the hallway to conference instead of embarrassing them in front of the class. I showed up every day ready to reach and teach. I did all the things. What became exhausting wasn't a lack of effort or heart. It was the realization that I was doing everything I had been trained to do, and it still wasn't enough. I was emotionally and mentally drained, questioning whether the work I loved was even sustainable. What I didn't realize at the time was that my frustration wasn't a failure. It was a signal. A signal that The way I had been trained to respond to behavior was incomplete, a signal that I needed new tools, a deeper understanding of child development, and a different lens, one that centered connection, culture, and context instead of control. That moment, when I felt like giving up, became the turning point that pushed me to learn, unlearn, and reimagine what supporting children and educators could actually look like. And when I came to understand next, and what I came to understand next changed not just how I taught, but how I understood children. What ultimately allowed me to stay in this profession wasn't just resilience, it was a mindset shift. A child is a child, not a small adult, not a fully regulated being, not someone with mature executive functioning, impulse control, or emotional regulation. A child is a developing human. And when schools ignore development, behavior becomes a battle instead of communication. And when schools ignore development, behavior becomes a battle instead of communication. That understanding changed how I viewed discipline, expectations, and accountability. It changed how I responded, not just to behavior, but to children themselves. And that question, how do systems respond to developing humans, followed me straight into my doctoral work. As I worked on my doctorate, my purpose became crystal clear. I became deeply committed to culturally responsive pedagogy through a social justice lens, not as a buzzword, but as a responsibility. I studied inequitable systems. I studied policies that disproportionately impact Black and Brown children. I studied how race, class, trauma, and access shape school experiences. What I learned confirmed what I had already seen in classrooms for years. Behavior is often a symptom, not the problem. And systems that are inequitable will always label children as the issue instead of examining themselves. My doctoral work gave me the language, the data, and the frameworks to advocate more effectively. It helped me name what I had felt but couldn't always articulate. And when I finally saw these principles implemented well, when I saw schools slow down, center humanity, and hold adults accountable, everything clicked. That clarity is why the advocate exists. I had been introduced to PBIS earlier in my career, but it wasn't until I moved to Atlanta that I saw it implemented with fidelity and intention. I was blessed to land in a school within a district where PBIS was fully implemented and deeply understood. At that school, there was a leader who changed everything for me, Dr. McGee. Dr. McGee had been a teacher, but she had also been a counselor, and I feel like that mattered because it showed up in how she led. Her mindset, baby, was simple and unwavering. We know our children, and we are here to serve them. This was a school with a population that was about 50% Black, 50% Hispanic, and over 90% of our students received free and reduced lunch. She was clear with the staff. Punitive discipline is not what we're doing here. She understood both the short-term consequences and the long-term impact punitive practices would have on the populations of students we served, from damaged relationships to disengagement from school, from loss of instructional time to the school-to-prison pipeline. Instead, we focused on developmentally appropriate expectations, trauma-informed practices, restorative approaches, explicit teaching of social emotional skills. Expectations were posted everywhere, on every wall, in every space where children needed clarity and consistency. And this wasn't just about posters on walls, it was about systems behind them. Because teacher expectations were just as clear as the student expectations. Dr. McGee inspected what she expected. She held each of us accountable for applying what we learned in all of those professional developments. And she didn't do that without providing support, correcting in love, modeling practices, offering incentives and encouragement. Accountability was paired with care. That matters. When I arrived at the school, I was nearing completion of my doctorate. I asked to attend meetings to learn as much as I could. I joined the PBIS team and was asked to serve as the data analyst along with Professor Gooden, a master data analyst. What stood out to me was this: data wasn't used to punish children, it was used to adjust systems. We asked, where are breakdowns happening? What support is missing? How do adults need to change placement, supervision, or instruction? We tweaked systems to prevent misbehavior before it happened. The counselors played an integral role, supporting students and teachers with trauma-informed and restorative practice. And I need to say this: that school didn't just support children, it was therapeutic for me. I remember walking into that building and feeling loved by the faculty, staff, and students. I fell back in love with teaching at that school because my studies and that school gave me alignment. Listen here, this is the piece: alignment. My expectations began to meet child development, real brain research. My responses began to match what the brain is actually capable of under stress. And the system around me finally reinforced what I already believed about children. It wasn't that my students didn't appreciate me. It was that the environment, the structures, and the adult responses around them weren't always designed to support regulation, healing, and growth for them or for educators. That alignment is what changed everything. I also come to this work as a mother. I'm the mother of 2 boys. And because I'm an educator, I've always had an inside view of how schools work. I knew the language, the systems, and how to advocate when something didn't feel fair. And most parents don't have that access. Let me give you a personal example. My youngest son, Michael, was a strong student, an AB student, nearly straight A's. He was involved in choir, garden club, basketball, and consistently recognized for leadership and character. Then COVID happened. He was transitioning into middle school during a global pandemic, starting a new school virtually without the support students typically receive. I noticed quickly that students were being graded as if conditions were normal. They weren't, y'all. Michael struggled, not because he wasn't capable, but because the system wasn't responsive to what children were experiencing. I advocated. I explained to the principal that the data they were collecting was skewed, that access, support, and home environments were not equal. His response felt cold, even procedural. So I made the decision and moved him to my school, Dr. McGee's school, where systems were aligned with child development and trauma-informed care. And he flourished again. That experience reinforced something I believe deeply. Parents often assume schools always get it right. And when something goes wrong, they turn their frustration towards their child without realizing the system itself may be misaligned. We fuss at our kids. Why aren't you doing what the teacher said? Why didn't you complete this? Why didn't you do that? When it's something wrong with the system. This podcast exists so parents don't have to navigate this alone. So what is the advocate? This podcast is pro-teacher, pro-child, pro-family, pro-accountability, but accountability grounded in development, equity, and justice. So we aim to see children clearly, support educators honestly, empower families meaningfully, and challenge systems when they fall short. Everything shared here is rooted in practice, research, and lived experiences. This is not a one-way conversation. If you have questions about school practices, if there's a situation you'd like unpacked, if there's a post-policy or experience you want examined through an advocacy lens, you can reach out on Facebook, Instagram, my email, or leave comments wherever you listen. Your questions help shape these conversations because advocacy begins when people feel seen, heard, and supported. In our next episode, you guys want to tune in. We'll explore what happens when discipline replaces development. We'll talk about why punishment feels effective in the moment but fails long term, how brain development and trauma shape behavior, and why certain students are disciplined more harshly for the same actions. This is not about lowering expectations. It's about raising our understanding. If you've ever felt uneasy about a discipline decision, episode 2 is for you. As we close today's episode, I want to leave you with this reminder. Advocacy isn't about taking sides. It's about taking responsibility for children. New episodes of The Advocate are released every Wednesday, and together we'll continue to amplify voices, challenge systems, and prioritize children. I'm Dr. Kristi Love. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions, keep showing up for children, and keep advocating because children deserve adults who won't stop fighting for them.